It's been 8 years since Alan Rickman passed away, but Harry Potter actors and fans worldwide still love and remember him.
Always.
What made the kids on the set fall in love with Alan? Which Harry Potter star had a heart-to-heart talk with him after filming? And how did he help create Snape's character? Let's recall why Alan Rickman was the best human being ever. How kids loved him, but not from the very beginning. In fact, when the series had just begun, the young Harry Potter actors were terrified of Alan, all because of how great he was as the intimidating Professor Snape. Some children were afraid of even talking to him.
So it took me about 6 years to flat out the courage to say anything more than, "Good morning, Alan," and that was it.
Daniel Radcliffe could say the same thing.
Alan Rickman was so fantastic, I was freaked. I was constantly having to remind myself that it's only a film, it's only a film, it's only a film, it's only a film, nothing's real. But it was terrifying.
Eventually, everyone realized that Alan was a completely different person in real life. He was kind and loving. When they had visitors on the set, he'd always be followed by a crowd of children. It turns out that Alan had always loved kids and wished to be a father, but he put his dreams aside because his long-term wife, politician Rima Horton, didn't want children. Here's how he commented on it. "Sometimes I think that in an ideal world, 3 children aged 12, 10, and 8 would be dropped on us, and we would be great parents for that family. But it never happened. So Alan channeled all of his love to Harry Potter's young cast, and they certainly felt it." Here's what Dan said in his tribute when Rickman passed away. "Working with him at such a formative age was incredibly important, and I will carry the lessons he taught me for the rest of my life and career." The Snape actor even gifted him a copy of his favorite book, The Catcher in the Rye. Yeah, they were that close. And it leads us to the next reason why Alan was so amazing. The master of pranks. This is one of the funniest stories from the Harry Potter set. Remember the scene in The Prisoner of Azkaban where all the students sleep in the Great Hall, and Snape and Dumbledore are walking around them and talking about Sirius Black? It was quite a serious setting. But it became very different behind the scenes, thanks to Rickman and his co-star, Michael Gambon.
Really, really funny.
And for you?
For Dan, it became the most embarrassing day ever.
We enter completely our own world. You know, it's completely our own world. And we like to swim in the deepest waters.
You're hearing the sounds right, and here's where they were coming from.
They had put a fart machine into my sleeping bag.
This hall echo.
And Michael Gambon had actually been pressing it during the take, I found out.
It was all Alan's idea, and here's something that made the whole thing worse. Dan happened to lie in the Great Hall next to the girl he had a crush on at the time. Probably he never dared to approach her after that. But Alan and Michael were extremely happy about their prank. Yeah, Rickman had quite a sense of humor, and he also had a heart of gold. Realizing someone else's dream. He was the master of potions on the screen. Yet in real life, Alan didn't need any elixirs to make people feel better. He always had a genuine desire to help others. During the production, the crew would organize set visits for terminally ill children, and one of them was especially touching. There was a boy named Jay who was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma. He was a huge fan of Harry Potter, and he couldn't wait to meet his favorite actors. One of them was Alan. The Snape actor had a heartwarming conversation with the boy. Jay surprised him with his vast knowledge of Rickman's filmography, even beyond Harry Potter, and he added that he always wanted to be cast in the movies. Without much thinking, Alan realized the boy's dream. He just looked at the crew and seriously asked, "Why isn't this child in the film?" The next thing that happened was that Jay became an extra in The Prisoner of Azkaban. It was the scene where Lupin teaches the students to fight off a boggart. Although the moment with Jay on the screen wasn't used in the final cut, it made the boy extremely happy. And he wasn't the last person whose life was changed by Alan. You can do it. On Alan's last day on the Harry Potter set, he was suddenly visited by his younger co-star. It was Matthew Lewis who played Neville. He went to Rickman's trailer to say goodbye, but even standing at the door, Matthew was terrified to knock. Although he wasn't afraid of Snape anymore, Alan intimidated him because of his superstar status. Eventually, Lewis dared to knock and said something very sweet.
"I just want to say thank you for allowing me to work with you for 10 years and not ever shouting at me or treating any of us anything less than your equal."
For sure, Alan was touched by those words, because he immediately invited Matthew into his trailer for a cup of tea.
And we just chatted about what I was going to do, in my career going forward. And
what's more, Rickman gave him some acting advice that changed the young actor's life.
He did say, "You can do it." He said that to me. Those are his words. He says, you can do it.
It meant a lot to Matthew. After their talk, he knew how to develop his acting skills. And there was only one thing Lewis regretted that day.
I'm so glad I did that. I wish I'd done it 5 years earlier, you know what I mean?
Much earlier during production, Alan also had a sweet interaction with his other co-star. Want to see a doodle of Snape? This story happened while filming one of the first movies. Back then, Rickman still terrified younger actors with his Snape presence. Young Rupert Grint had a funny story about it.
I was just doodling with my quill in the book. I drew this rather unpretty picture of Alan Rickman.
And right at that moment, he was confronted.
Alan Rickman was standing right behind me, and I was so scared.
Rupert would be in huge trouble if Alan were only slightly similar to Snape. But the ending to that pretty uncomfortable situation was actually nice.
He was really cool about it. I think he even kept the pictures.
Alan himself once shared that he did more than just keep it.
I made him sign it, and I have it in my possession. And I'm very fond of it.
This is another proof that Alan was a kind friend to everyone on the set. And you might not know that he also contributed to creating his character. Becoming Snape. Did you know that Rickman was closely involved in fashioning Snape's costume? For example, it was his idea that there had to be a lot of buttons, and that the sleeves needed to be sufficiently tight, and he'd always ensure his cloak looked as perfect as possible on the screen. For example, you certainly remember the scene with Malfoy and Snape in the Half-Blood Prince, where the professor saves him from Sectum Sempra. Here's how the costume designer, Janie Tamime, recalled filming it. He did that 20 times, and 20 times the cape was exactly precisely draped on the floor in a perfect position. She added that one has to be a Shakespearean actor to do that. Well, indeed. But helping create Snape's look wasn't the only contribution Alan made. He also always ensured that his portrayal was perfect, and he could do it because he knew at least a bit of Snape's backstory. Early in the production, J.K. Rowling had a private conversation with Rickman, and she shared a secret with him. As the writer later explained, she told him what lies behind the word, always. Alan kept this secret till the very end of the series. Funnily enough, sometimes he'd argue with the director because of that. It happened at the times he was asked to do something Rickman knew Snape wouldn't do. At those moments, he'd refuse and give his own suggestion. Even Dan remembers how it was.
Chris would literally say to him, "Why are you doing that like that?" He said, "I'll tell you later."
So we can definitely tell that when the series was over, Alan was relieved. He could finally talk about it.
The last film, it was very cathartic because you were finally able to see who he was.
After all this time, Alan always held the Harry Potter series close to his heart. He was a huge fan of the books and intended to remain this way. When I'm 80 years old and sitting in my rocking chair, I'll be reading Harry Potter. And my family will say to me, "After all this time?" And I will say, "Always." Sadly, he didn't live to be that age and passed away at 69. But he'll forever live in our hearts. What was your favorite Snape moment in the series? And what other roles of Alan Rickman do you love? Share in the comments below and watch our other videos about the Harry Potter franchise.